Hello, welcome to deploying Windows 11 via BigFix and OST, brought to you by thetransittech.com, where all your endpoint needs are met under one roof. Today we're going to discuss deploying Windows 11 via BigFix and OST. There's some prerequisites here that are out of scope for this video. One is obviously you want to have your BigFix server. Number two is that you need to have at least one relay deployed. Number three is the OST server. And remember, this must be built on a relay. You can have a relay be just a relay, but the bare metal server must be installed on a relay. And you probably want to make it a local relay rather than a cloud relay because you don't want to push 5+ gig of ISOs down through the cloud because of egress. Obviously, you're going to want to have an MDT bundle creator, and that can be installed on a workstation or a server. You're only going to use this whenever there is a new operating system, for instance, Windows 7, Windows 10 to Windows 11. You won't use it very often because it doesn't change very often, but when it does change, you need to update it and create a brand new MDT bundle creator and then upload it to the server. And then obviously you're going to have a Pixie environment. If you install OSD server or bare metal server on an environment, network segment, it will clobber any other Pixie such as SCCM, etc. on your environment. So just be aware that you might want to disable Pixie if you have something else on the same network segment. So we're going to dive right in right here and double check our go to our systems lifecycle domain. Then we're going to go to OS deployment bare metal imaging. Server management. As you can see, I actually have a bare metal server already configured, but if you wanted to install one, you would simply click the install button. I'm going to walk you through installing it on a relay. Remember, you must install OS deployment or bare metal on a relay. So I'm going to click relay or install there up in the upper left-hand corner, and I'm going to click I have read and agree to these licenses. This is going to install .NET Framework and SQL Express 2014 SP1 and SQL Express 2017. I'm just going to go ahead and click next here. Now there's three options here. You can send it to the default location, which I like to do because it allows you to find the log files for OSD much easier. But you can also choose the drive with the most free space if you so desire, or you can specify a location. But like I said, I'm going to just choose the default location here. And in here is a username and password. This is going to be for your OS deployment bare metal imaging web interface. This is basically going to set your password so that you can log into that web interface and do some configuration and deployments if you'd like. This is going to pop up a fixlet that I could highlight any of my relays. This is the only relay in my lab environment that doesn't already have operating system deployment. So that's the only option I have because again, I have to install it on a relay. I'm not going to do that here. I was just doing this for demo purposes. So I'm going to cancel out of this. So now that we have our bare metal servers installed, we are going to now navigate to OS deployment and bare metal imaging, and then manage images and drivers, and then image library. Now I'm going to import an image. This is our new Windows 11 image. I'm going to import that, and you can do this three ways. You can either import the WIM itself, you can use the ISO, or you can mount the ISO and then use the drive letter. I'm going to just do the ISO in this scenario because I have it saved here. What it does, it's a lot of times it doesn't make you uncompress and decompress. And then hit analyze. We're going to hit analyze here and wait for the pop-ups to happen. And I'm going to pause the video until that's done. It takes a little while. They've increased this a lot over the years. They now do not rely on Flash, which is great because it used to give you a pop-up every 30 seconds or a minute to ask if you want to stop running the scripts on this page. So as you can see, we have uploaded our image. It is the it still does say Windows 10, even though it is Windows 11. I imagine HCL will fix that here in the next few weeks before the release of Windows 11 on October 5th, 2021. So now we have an image here, and in order to do anything with this image, you have to create what they call a bare metal profile. This is something that allows you to configure or manipulate your installation. I'm going to pull it up here for you to give you an example. I've already created one, so I'm just going to pull that one up by hitting edit over here. This allows you to do things like pick your edition. Which Windows edition do you want? Registered owner, registered organization, your locale, where are you at, your time zone. And here's one of the biggest pieces is your naming convention. This is what the machine's going to be named when it comes into your environment. So I always put W11 or W10 depending on the OS, and then variable dash serial number, because your serial number is the one thing that doesn't change. So it allows us to, in a sense, put Humpty Dumpty back together again once it's been wiped and re-imaged. We can then say, we'll then change its name later in the post baseline script. But I like to do it this way because it's a thin image. So imagine if you leave all of your information or all your applications on the image. Every time one of those gets updated, you're going to have to recreate your image and do this all over again. Whereas if you use the thin image, which is nothing but the ISO from Windows or Microsoft, it allows you to manipulate the image after the fact, which is it's much cleaner if you ask me. And also, by wiping your machine rather than upgrading, you normalize your applications. So you don't have 50 versions of Chrome or 50 versions of Adobe out there. It allows you to normalize your environment. You can also choose your client version. This is you might want to go to a lower version for some reason. I wouldn't recommend that, but there might be a scenario where you need to do that. And you get to pick your MDT bundle. Which MDT bundle are you using? And then your deployment action. After the install, what's it going to do? It's going to restart. That's how we have it here. You can join the computer to the domain and use your username and your credentials here. And you can also add the product key. Now there's another key here called deployment password. You might have machines, and I've seen this at several clients, where you'll have machines that are set up to Pixie boot automatically by default. That's their primary. And most of the time, if you don't have a Pixie boot server, it won't affect you. But if you do, and you don't have a deployment password, then your users can basically deploy the OS, wipe their machines, and not necessarily know what they're doing. So it's good to have a deployment password so that you can regulate who can use this at what time. And there's ways to bypass that for your end users, and we'll get into that in a later video. You can also set up your BitLocker and TPM and your drive mappings. So this is how you deploy it, right? This is basically you configuring the box right out of the as soon as it's deployed, it will configure it accordingly. So we're going to cancel that since I already have it. Now there's one other thing here. When you build this, you're going to want to sync it to the server, which I've already done, but you can do that using this, and it'll tell you it's already in sync with all your OS deployment servers. You can also create a re-image profile. This is good for upgrading if you'd like to upgrade. You can also use fixlets built in to the OS deployment in the lifecycle domain to utilize this image and upgrade it from there, which is, I think, much easier. This just gives you the power to do so from inside lifecycle. I always like to use the fixlets because they call the images directly when you're doing an upgrade. And it is worthy of noting that Microsoft's path of upgrading is no longer wipe and replace and reload. It is actually to upgrade your endpoints. And it makes it a lot easier if you already have Windows 10 because you don't have to flip to UEFI, which is a whole other beast. Flipping to UEFI creates a lot of coding and things that you have to do, and it might not work for specific models. So now that we have our OS deployment BigFix environment built, we are going to test it. So now I'm going to log into my ESX environment. I'm going to reset this guy because I've done this a couple of times. And I'm going to hit escape as soon as I can. Then I'm going to go to boot off my EFI network. And now it's going to start Pixie booting over IPv4. Now it starts to load the boot.wim, which takes a few minutes. But while this is going, I want to explain to you that this is booting WinPE, and there are driver problems sometimes with certain models. So what you do there is you wind up going to inject your drivers if you run into a problem. But for the most part, out of the box works just fine. There are also some FTP settings that you can manipulate within the OS deployment web interface that allow you to tweak the Pixie boot settings for your network. And because every network's different. I like to try to build it out of the box and get this process all working correctly, regardless of the time it takes, and then we tweak the settings after the fact. Now remember, with Windows 10 or Windows 7 to Windows 10, in order to utilize the new Windows 10 security features, you had to enable UEFI to enable secure boot and TPM and all those other advanced security features. It's going to ask me to flip to UEFI. I'm going to hit yes, and a couple other scripts are going to run. It's going to figure out that this is already UEFI, so it's just going to continue on. But if it was BIOS, it would flip for the main vendors, Lenovo, HP, Dell, it would flip the machine to UEFI and reboot and then start this process all over again. But the next time you wouldn't have to flip it. It's just loading up the image profiles at the moment. Now this is talking, remember, directly back to your OS deployment server. Now, I know it's not 1903. It's this one. Even though it says Windows 10, it's not. And this is back to where we talked about your deployment password. You need to have a deployment password so you can stop your end users from doing this unless they know how to do it or they're supposed to do it. You can add the UUID into the bare metal server that says if this UUID comes across, just automatically go. So if you're doing a batch of them at one night, you can do a whole bunch of them at once without having to do that piece, because it'll just say, oh, I know which one, I know which profile I need to go get. I'm just going to use that one. And then here we go. It's going to format the disk, prepare the deployment binaries, run the light touch install, which is ultimately going to install your BigFix client. So as you can see here, the deployment is almost finished installing the operating system. The light touch installation should, after this piece is complete, run through the installation of the BigFix client, which will automatically register as expected inside the console. And it looks like our OS deployment is complete. We should see the client go in next. And light touch should be done, and then we should be doing some cleanup here thereafter, and then we'll reboot. And it's doing that now. So this was a brand new VM. We booted into WinPE, installed the operating system and the BigFix client automatically. And now we're going to boot into Windows 11. So we now have Windows 11 booted up, This is going to be the password that you set in your deployment profile for the administrator. You can change this later, and you can also have BigFix do it as well. Let's say, for instance, you wanted to change it from administrator to admin or something not administrator, which is kind of standard security practices for the Microsoft environment. And we're just going to do a verification here, make sure we're using the right version. We are using Windows 11. And we are. Look at that. Okay, so now there is one other piece that I want to delve into now that we have our OS deployment working correctly. Right? And you notice it wasn't very slow either. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our IP address of the OS deployment server. You could do this via DNS as well. Here is you're actually logging into your operating system deployment server web interface. I hope if I could type my password correctly. But here is things that you can do. You can set TFTP settings, which there are very many, and you would want to do that after you configure all this. You can target, monitor, you can find out history. You can actually deploy from here. I wouldn't recommend doing it from here. It's more of a pain than it is just doing it from the console. But you can do it. There's lots of different features in here. And there's a bunch of settings in here, mainly for tuning TFTP settings, that we will probably delve into another video. But this is your BigFix OS deployment web interface. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop me a line on in the comments below, or you can email me from the front of the slide point presentation. It has my email address. And we'd be glad to help you in all of your endpoint needs here at the Transit Tech. Have a good day.